He fed the starving alien girl who tried to sell herself. He didn't know she'd become his future wife. Shard's Edge had a way of swallowing sound and spitting back silence. The corridors stretched like the bones of a forgotten beast, cracked steel plates groaning under the weight of frost and broken lives. Vapor hissed from corroded pipes, curling like smoke through the stale air. Everything here was recycled. Oxygen, water, purpose. Especially purpose. Jalen Rourke kept his collar up and his eyes forward, hands buried deep in his coat pockets as he walked the long way home from the night shift. The temperature inside the dome had dropped again. The regulators couldn't keep up anymore. He could feel it in the air, a biting chill that scraped against his skin, even through layers. He passed two men arguing over a scrap of heated wiring. One pushed the other into a wall. The second man didn't fight back. No one stopped to help. Not Jalen. Not anyone. The street just flowed around the scene like water around a rock. Shard's Edge had laws, just none anyone bothered to follow. He'd walked this stretch 100 times. A few months ago, he would have walked past the girl too. But this time he didn't. She was standing near the broken relay tower, where leaking energy coils radiated erratic warmth in soft pulses, just enough to keep frostbite from reaching the bone. She wasn't leaning or hiding. She stood straight, proud, in a way that didn't fit the tremble in her hands or the way her skirt clung like wet paper to her thighs. Her skin was green, mossy in the shadows, vibrant where the neon hit it, and her long black hair hung in damp, uneven strands around her face. Her feet were bare against the freezing metal. One hand held a small square of rag paper. The other hovered near her waist, fingers grazing the fabric of her skirt with an ambiguous curl. The wind caught the paper briefly. Jalen read the words upside down, scrawled in 3 languages. Warm for food. An older merchant, Pharaohan species, heavy robes, cybernetic jaw, passed her without stopping. He let out a short laugh, barked something in his native tongue, and disappeared into the dark. She didn't react. Then she turned her head slightly, and their eyes met. Her gaze didn't waver. Silver, flat, and unreadable. Eyes that didn't shine. They used to maybe. Not tonight. You want company, human? She said. No hesitation. No accent. Just fatigue. I don't cost much. 1 meal. No strings. Jalen stopped 2 paces away, unsure why his boots had disobeyed his brain. She wasn't afraid of him. That much was clear. And she wasn't selling desire. She was selling heat, survival, the last scrap of herself. Have you eaten today? He asked. She blinked, caught off guard. No, she said, slowly. But if you want. Don't finish that, Jalen said. Quiet. Firm. Come with me. She didn't move right away. A subtle shift passed over her expression. Not trust. Not suspicion, either. Something wearier. She was measuring whether she could outpace him if he turned on her. He didn't press her. Just stood still, hands visible. His voice came again, calm and patient. I have food. I won't touch you. That's not what this is. A pause. Then she nodded once. The smallest movement. She followed him. They walked in silence, her bare feet padding soundlessly across frost-lined panels. He didn't offer his coat, didn't touch her, just slowed his pace enough for her to keep up. She said nothing, but he heard her breathing change, short, controlled inhales like someone trained to stay quiet even when in pain. Jalen keyed in his access code. The door to his unit hissed open, and stale warmth spilled into the corridor. She hesitated at the threshold. He tilted his head. Go in. She entered. Cautiously. His dwelling was small. Efficient. A prefab contractor's special, once meant for surveyors, and now barely enough for 1 man and his ghosts. 1 cot. 1 heater. 1 table. 2 chairs. No decorations. No memories. He didn't ask if she was cold. That was obvious. He handed her a folded thermal wrap and gestured to the cot. I'll warm something. She took the wrap without thanks. Sat down like a prisoner told to wait. Her eyes didn't settle. She kept tracking exits, surfaces, the distance between them. Trained, maybe, or just experienced. Jalen opened 2 ration tins. The stew was thick with preservatives, but hot. It smelled like salt, starch, and something that might have once been meat. He handed her the bowl. She held it like it might vanish. Then the scent hit her, and she brought it to her mouth. One sip, then two, then a greedy, messy third. She tried not to rush, but her hand betrayed her. She ate like someone who hadn't had heat in her belly in days. Jalen sat across from her and quietly began heating the second tin for himself. Her eyes flicked to him between bites, but said nothing. Neither did he. When she finished, she wiped her mouth with the back of her wrist and placed the empty bowl down carefully. Then her hands moved to the clasp at the front of her top. "I'll keep my promise," she said. The words were flat, mechanical. Not seductive, not emotional, just something owed. One meal. That was the deal. Jalen stood, turned his back. "You're not here because of that," he said. She froze. "You're staying," he continued, "because I don't want to wake up tomorrow and find another frozen body outside my door." Silence. He reached into the supply crate near the wall and pulled out the second blanket, laid it out neatly on the floor beside the cot, sat down beside it back against the wall. Behind him, the cot creaked. Fabric shifted. A quiet voice. "No one's ever turned me down like that before." He didn't answer. But then, softly, she added, "You didn't even look." He smiled faintly, eyes closed. "Didn't need to." She didn't respond. Minutes passed. He heard the cot creak again as she adjusted, then again. The breathing never settled. Then, finally, he heard her exhale, slow and shaky. Her voice, barely audible. "Don't sell me again." He opened his eyes, but didn't move. She was already asleep. And in that moment, with her words still hanging in the air like vapor, Jalen realized something that made his throat tighten. He'd walked past too many broken shapes like her before. This time, he didn't. Shard's Edge had no mornings, only lighter shades of gray. The ceiling lights in the upper struts flicked from deep amber to a clinical white, casting long shadows across the frost-lined walls. It was a cold, sterile imitation of sunrise. But in a place like this, even faking daylight took effort. Jalen Rourke didn't sleep much. He lay on the floor of his prefab, staring at the ceiling, wrapped in a thermal blanket that barely held off the cold bleeding through the walls. The heater hummed beside him in fits, groaning each time the temperature dipped below safe levels. Across the room, the cot creaked softly. The alien woman, Syri, still slept, curled tight under the better blanket, arms tucked beneath her like she might slide off the edge of the world if she let go. She'd said it in her sleep the night before. A single, broken whisper, "Don't sell me again." Jalen hadn't moved when she said it. But the words had settled somewhere deep, just behind his ribs, where cold couldn't quite reach, but guilt always could. He rose slowly, letting the blanket fall away. The prefab was quiet, save for the heater's unsteady breath and the occasional echo of boots stomping in the alley outside. Jalen walked to the storage unit, opened a ration tin, and set the heat coil to warm. It hissed and popped as it activated, releasing the familiar chemical scent of shelf-stable stew, something between brine and ashes. He poured the contents into a dented bowl, watching it bubble. Behind him, the cot shifted again. Syri sat up with a slow inhale, like she wasn't sure if she was supposed to still be alive. Her long black hair spilled over her shoulders in tangled, uneven waves. The green hue of her skin had warmed slightly, no longer the gray-tinged shade of a half-frozen body. She blinked at the light, then at him. He didn't speak, just pushed the bowl across the table. She stared for a moment, then climbed off the cot without a word. The thermal blanket remained wrapped around her like a robe. She sat across from him, fingers curled tightly around the bowl, letting the steam rise into her face. "I didn't think I'd wake up here," she said softly. "You said you weren't leaving," Jalen replied. "I didn't think you'd let me stay." He shrugged. "Didn't say I wouldn't." She ate a spoonful of stew, slower this time. Her hands didn't shake the way they had last night, but she still hunched over the bowl like someone could snatch it away at any second. "You're quiet," she murmured. "So are you." She looked up. "Do you always bring strangers home?" "No," he said. "Never." She tilted her head. "Then why?" Jalen leaned back in the chair. His joints ached from the floor. I don't know. Maybe because I used to walk past people like you and feel nothing. And last night, I didn't. She nodded once, but didn't respond. Just ate in silence. When she finished, she set the spoon down with surprising care. Then she stood and began folding the blanket. Not to give it back, just to tidy it. She didn't act like a guest. She acted like someone who expected to be useful or be gone. I can help, she said. I'm not useless. He raised an eyebrow. I didn't say you were. I've done cargo manifests, air seal maintenance, worked under freezing pressure domes. I know how to patch coolant lines without rupturing the secondary matrix. You're not from around here, are you? She hesitated. Not anymore. He didn't push. Instead, he nodded toward the rear utility panel. There's a valve back there that leaks pressure every third cycle. You want to prove yourself? Start there. She didn't smile, just nodded. Jalen handed her a torch and seal tape from the crate beneath the table. She knelt without hesitation, sliding open the access panel and scanning the junction with sharp, practiced eyes. Within moments, he heard the hiss of pressure being released, followed by precise clinks and clicks of tool against metal. She worked in silence. Clean, efficient, focused. When she emerged 10 minutes later, sealant smudged across one cheek. The leak was gone. He studied her for a moment. How'd you learn that? Her answer came without pride. I was property. Property learns things. Jalen's jaw tensed. You're not property anymore. Depends who you ask. He didn't like that answer, but he didn't argue. Later, while organizing his inventory list, he noticed her eyes tracking the figures on a screen. Without being asked, she pointed out a discrepancy. You've got 12 heat wraps listed. I counted 10. Might want to check crates C2. He stared at her. You memorized the layout? I observed, she said. It's safer that way. He looked at her for a long moment. You don't have to be useful to stay here. She didn't blink. Then I'll stay useful anyway. Jalen sighed, leaned back in his chair. I'm not keeping you. You're free to go whenever you want. Then maybe I won't want to go, she said. And for the first time, her voice didn't sound like stone. It sounded like maybe she was wondering what it would feel like to be wanted. Not purchased, not pitted. Just wanted. That night, they didn't talk much. She claimed the cot again, this time lying down without hesitation. He took the floor. The heater hummed steadily. As he began to drift off, her voice reached him through the dark. Do humans believe names mean something? He opened his eyes. Some do. My people name girls only if they survive their first contract. If not, they're just inventory. You survived. I did. Barely. He waited. I chose the name Syri when I escaped, she continued. It means the left behind. He turned toward her voice. That's not what you are anymore. Silence. Then, you didn't even ask what species I am. I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to. You really don't want anything from me? I want you to eat. Sleep. Be warm. Maybe not hate this place so much. Another pause. Then a whisper, so soft it barely survived the air between them. Then I might stay. She said nothing else. Her breathing slowed. And this time, when she slept, she didn't curl into herself like a kicked dog. She stretched her legs slightly. Not fully, but enough. Jalen listened for a while. He didn't reach for anything. Not her name. Not her story. Not even her trust. But for the first time in years, he felt like someone had stepped into his world, not to take something, but maybe, just maybe, to share it. The days on Shard's Edge didn't follow time so much as temperature. Morning, afternoon, and night all bled into one another in the same thin, gray light. What mattered was whether the heat system groaned when it kicked on, or didn't at all. That morning it did. The heater rattled to life before sunrise, sending bursts of stale warmth into the cramped prefab. Jalen was already awake, going over the week's stock manifest on his scratch datapad, when he heard the cot creak behind him. Syri sat up slowly, hair cascading forward in dark waves. She blinked against the pale glow of the overhead panels. Her skin, now a richer, steady green, looked less sallow than it had 2 nights ago. She still moved carefully, still checked the room like she expected something to be missing or taken. Jalen glanced over his shoulder. Water's still hot. if you want a shower. Her eyes flicked to him, sharp with surprise. There's a shower? It's not much, but it works. He jerked his chin toward the rear unit. Through the storage bay, gravity fed. Enough pressure for one person, if you don't mind recycled steam. He didn't expect her to accept. Not immediately, but she hesitated only a moment, then rose wordlessly, gathering the blanket around her shoulders like a makeshift robe. He stood and rummaged through a locker until he found a clean undersuit, gray, stitched at the seams, slightly too big. He held it out. Here. She took it without a word. Her hand brushed his when she did. A brief touch, featherlight. She didn't flinch this time. Jalen turned away as she disappeared through the back corridor. The prefab fell quiet. Water hissed from behind the bulkhead, briefly, then stopped, then resumed again, more steadily. He could hear the clink of the supply caddy being moved, the soft thump of clothing being folded. It wasn't meant to be overheard, but in a place that small, everything was. He didn't let his mind wander. He refocused on the inventory, double-checking the mineral crate allocations. 10 minutes passed, then 12. Finally, the door opened again. Sairi stepped out, hair wet and skin steamed a shade deeper, like polished jade. The clean undersuit hung loosely on her frame, sleeves rolled up just above her wrists. Her face was freshly washed, free of soot and old exhaustion. But it wasn't the clothes that made her look different. It was her eyes. They weren't hard this time, just quiet, tired in a different way. You okay? Jalen asked, still leaning against the table, arms crossed. She didn't answer right away. She looked around the prefab like she was seeing it for the first time. Her hands flexed slightly at her sides. Then she said, "It's the first hot shower I've had since I left my last post." "You were stationed somewhere colder than this." "I was kept somewhere colder," she corrected. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. He watched her closely, but didn't ask. Whatever she'd endured, she wasn't ready to speak it. Not yet, but it hovered just beneath the surface now, no longer sealed behind silence. She crossed to the heater and held her hands near it, like someone relishing not just warmth but the right to feel it. Jalen stepped into the galley alcove and cracked open 2 ration tins. The same bland stew again. He hated the stuff, but it was hot and consistent. When he placed the bowl in front of her, she said quietly, "You could have charged me for all this." "I could have," he said, sitting across from her. "But you didn't." He met her eyes. "You already paid." She didn't speak for a while. Just ate. Slowly, carefully. Halfway through the meal, her voice came again, low even. "Back where I was, we had a phrase. If you're not useful, you're replaced." "Sounds like corporate life," Jalen said, almost dryly. She didn't smile. It wasn't business. It was breeding. He set a spoon down. "They used us like currency. Trained to manage cargo, speak languages, track product flow. Not because they valued us, but because it made us harder to lose in a trade deal." Her fingers tightened slightly around the bowl. "I got sick. Couldn't stand for days. I was told I'd be sent to reclamation." "What's reclamation?" he asked, though part of him already knew. "A pit," she said, "for those who stop being useful." The silence after that wasn't heavy. It was hollow. A space left for grief that had long since drained away. "I escaped through a refused chute," she added. "Took 2 days to dig through a lockbox. They threw me in." He didn't try to console her. Didn't offer sympathy. Instead, he asked, "When you left, did you take anything with you?" She looked at him, caught off guard. She reached into the fold of her newly washed undersuit and pulled out a thin strip of metal. Bent, burnished, barely thicker than a blade of grass. "A control tag," she said. "Used to be embedded in my neck." "Used to be," Jalen repeated, voice neutral. "I tore it out with a wire hook." She looked down at the object in her hand. "It took 4 tries. I passed out halfway through. Woke up in the bottom of a cargo hold on a smuggling rig." She slipped the tag back into the seam of her sleeve, then met his gaze. "So, if you're wondering why I flinched the first night, it wasn't because I was scared of you. I figured. It's because I didn't know what it meant when someone didn't want something from me." Jalen didn't reply. He reached for the stew again. Took a bite. After a long moment, he said, You can stay here as long as you want. But you don't have to be anything. Not useful, not grateful, not loyal. Her voice was quiet, but steady. Then maybe I'll choose to be all three. She finished her meal, set the bowl down gently, and stood. She began folding the blanket she had used the night before. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. That night, when they settled in, her on the cot, him on the floor, she spoke once more before the lights dimmed. When I was a child, she said, they told us that if you ever found a place where no one touched you, no one marked you, and no one claimed you, you were dreaming. Jalen's voice was calm in the dark. Then maybe you finally woke up. Sairi didn't respond. But this time, when she slept, she didn't curl in on herself. She stretched out, fully, and didn't wake once through the night. The fourth night arrived quieter than the last. There were no sirens, no tremors from freight skiffs docking overhead. Just the low hum of life, support thrumming steadily beneath the floors, and the occasional rattle of steel as temperature regulators shifted into their next feudal cycle. Inside the prefab, the heater kept up its stubborn battle against the cold. Jalen sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting damaged intake valves for salvage. Sairi was beside him, hunched over a battered connector ring she'd been cleaning with a rag and solvent. Her hair was finally dry, pulled back in a loose knot at the nape of her neck, though a few strands had escaped and curled down the side of her face. Neither of them spoke much. They rarely did while working. The silence wasn't strained anymore. It had settled into something companionable, useful. She finished polishing the ring and set it on the floor between them. This one's still functional. He nodded and tossed it into the key pile. You're fast. I was trained that way. Jalen glanced at her. You always do that. What? Reduce your skills to something someone else forced you to learn. Sairi paused, then wiped her hands on her pant leg. Yes. Jalen waited, not pressing but not letting the moment pass either. Finally, she said, because that's what it was. Forced. Everything I was taught, how to repair systems, how to memorize codes, how to keep my voice pleasant under stress. It was all designed to increase my trade value. And you're still doing it. Even now. It's hard to stop living like you're temporary, she said, when your life has always belonged to someone else. The words hung there, heavy and unflinching. Jalen leaned back, resting against the wall, arms draped over his knees. You know, I wasn't born on Shard's edge. Sairi gave a faint smile. I assumed. You don't walk like the rest of them. I was raised in the Martian colonies. Education grants. Gov-funded housing. Thought I was headed for something big. He stared at the wall opposite, as if seeing something beyond it. I became an architect, specialized in structural habitat design. My work was meant to keep people alive in unstable climates. You build shelters? She asked. Safe ones, he replied. Modular, redundant airflow, foldable geothermal panels. I spent 5 years perfecting a blueprint. Got it greenlit by Atlas Terra Industries for a mid-range expansion colony. And he exhaled through his nose, and the colony collapsed. Faulty construction by subcontractors. My name was on the designs. They needed someone to blame. She watched him now, quiet but focused. They pulled my credentials, my license, froze my accounts. No one in the core systems would touch me after that. So I drifted, ended up here, counting crates. A long silence followed. Sairi shifted her weight slightly, the faint sound of her breath rising and falling between them. They erased you, she said. Jalen gave a tight nod. Felt like it. I know what that feels like. She looked down at her hands. I used to be called Unit 46, Delta K. You gave yourself the name Sairi, he said. Yes, but even then, I didn't feel real. Not until she trailed off. Until what? She looked up at him. Her silver eyes didn't shimmer like they had when he'd first seen her, but they no longer dulled either. Not until someone looked at me and didn't ask what I could do. They just asked if I'd eaten. He didn't reply, but she saw the way his jaw clenched, how his eyes drifted to the empty food tins still stacked from dinner. Sairi drew her knees to her chest and wrapped her arms around them, curling slightly. I used to sleep in vents. Cargo vents. The ones near heat exhausts, where the noise was so loud I couldn't hear my own thoughts. It made it easier to forget, to stay small. Her voice wavered just for a moment. No one bothers with what they can't see. Jalen shifted closer, not touching, just being there. That night I found you, I didn't stop because I saw someone helpless. I know. I stopped because I saw someone standing there like she didn't belong to the cold, like she was refusing it. A breath hitched in her chest. She swallowed. I wanted someone to ask why. She whispered. Why I was out there. Why I had nothing left. Then I'm asking now, he said. What? She hesitated, eyes distant. Because I ran. From what? From the only life I knew. Because the second I became too sick to work, they decided I wasn't worth feeding. So I ran. I clawed my way through a supply tunnel with half my strength and half my blood, and I never looked back. She let out a shaky breath. And when I finally got out, when I reached this place, no one asked me why I was bleeding. No one even looked. Jalen sat still. He didn't reach out, didn't interrupt. They only looked when I held up that paper, she said, voice low. When I became something they could use again. Jalen's throat tightened. He reached over, slow, deliberate, and laid his hand beside hers, not touching, just offering. She stared at it for a second. Then she let her fingers slide over his. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't romantic. It was quiet. Earned. You're not temporary, he said. She leaned her head against the wall, eyes closed. Neither are you. They sat like that for a while, saying nothing, just sharing the warmth, the weight, and the fragile honesty that neither of them had known how to carry alone. That night, they didn't sleep apart. Cyree lay on the cot, turned slightly to face the wall. Jalen lay on the floor beside it, arms stretched out across the narrow space. Her fingers brushed his. And this time, when her breathing slowed, she didn't sleep like someone afraid of waking up. She slept like someone who had finally remembered what peace felt like. The emotion behind her words hit harder than any raised voice. Jalen didn't argue. He just took the pack and started toward the floor hatch. But he felt her following. He didn't stop her this time. Together, they worked in the narrow crawl space beneath the prefab, twisting through the cold guts of the structure. Tubing, wires, frost-slick plating. They spoke in quiet bursts, this line that circuit watched the ground. There was a rhythm to it now. Not just teamwork. Trust. The first shock hit while Cyree was holding the stabilizer plate. Her hands jerked. Sparks flew. Damn it, she hissed, pulling back. Jalen reached over, grabbing her wrist, checking her pulse and the heat of her skin. Her fingers were already reddening. I'm fine, she muttered, breath sharp. You're not, he said. You got jolted. I've had worse. That doesn't make this okay. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked up at him. And for a moment, he saw something raw flicker in her expression. Not defiance, not pain. Shame. Not from the burn. From being touched. He didn't pull away. Just kept holding her wrist, gently. You don't need to do this to prove you belong here, he said. She blinked. Then why am I still afraid you'll ask me to leave if I don't? Jalen let go slowly. Because someone taught you that safety has to be earned. She nodded, silent. But it doesn't. Not here. The words settled between them, warm and heavy. She didn't speak again as they finished the repairs. By the time they climbed back out, the backup circuit was holding. The heater's hum grew steady again, deeper and even. Inside, they stripped off the outer layers of cold-soaked clothing and sat near the warmth. Cyree didn't pull away when he sat closer. She didn't lean in either, but she didn't move. The silence was different now. Charged. After a long moment, she said quietly, You know why I offered myself that night? He didn't respond. She continued, voice calm but trembling slightly at the edges. Because it's all I thought I had left. I wasn't strong. I wasn't fertile. I couldn't offer joy or art or promise. Just a body. One more use. Jalen turned toward her, and you didn't take it. You didn't even look at it like something worth taking. Her voice cracked just once. You asked if I'd eaten. No one's ever asked me that first. He reached out, hand finding hers, not to pull her closer, but to be there. Steady. Present. I didn't want you because of what you could give, he said. I wanted you to live. That's all. She looked at their hands. Then why is this the first time I want someone to want me? Jalen moved closer. Not rushed. Not desperate. Just there. And when she kissed him, it wasn't a thank you or a transaction or an impulse. It was a question. Can I? May I? He didn't pull away. Her lips were warm against his, cautious at first, then deeper. Not urgent, just real. When they parted, she touched his cheek. I don't need saving, she said. I know, he replied, but I think I've been waiting for someone who didn't try. He let out a slow breath. Then maybe we both found what we didn't know we were missing. That night, they lay side by side, no longer separated by cot or floor. And for the first time, neither of them curled inward. They reached for each other, not as a shield, not as a salve, but simply because it felt right. Outside, the cold deepened. Inside, the heater hummed. And two people who'd once been nothing but survivors finally stopped surviving, just long enough to feel alive. Morning came slowly, dragging its weight through the walls of the prefab like a ghost trying to be remembered. The heater hummed in a steady rhythm, the faint smell of burnt wiring still lingering in the corners from last night's power reroute. Jalen woke first, careful not to disturb the warmth beside him. Syrie was curled against his side, her breath even, her body finally relaxed, fully and without fear. He didn't move. For a long time, he simply watched her sleep. There was a quiet to her now, not absence, but peace. Something earned, something delicate. He brushed a strand of hair from her face and let his fingers hover just a second longer. She didn't flinch. That meant everything. When she stirred, it was slow, a soft inhale. Her fingers found his chest and rested there, grounding herself in him as if making sure the night before hadn't vanished into some cruel dream. You stayed, she murmured, her voice rough with sleep. I did. Her eyes opened, silver, sharp, and full of something he'd never seen there before. Ease. You didn't run. I wouldn't know where to run from you, he said gently. She blinked, then let out a small breath that wasn't quite a laugh. Good answer. They spent the early hours in quiet movements, him boiling water for morning broth, her patching the cracked seal on the window panel. It felt almost ordinary, like they'd always done this, like the world outside had finally stopped spinning. But it hadn't. By midday, the quiet was broken. The warning came not in a knock, but in the way the light flickered, a pattern too specific to be random. 1-2 pause. 1-2 pause. The signal of someone watching, someone waiting for an opening. Jalen stiffened. Syrie moved to the console and checked the perimeter feed. She didn't need to speak. 2 figures. Not patrol. No insignia. No identifiers. Mercs. Someone reported movement on our grid, she said, her voice clipped. He moved beside her. They've been tracking her, he thought. Maybe since the market run. Syrie didn't hesitate. We have 2 minutes, maybe less. Crawl space, he asked. She looked at him. No. We fight. His breath hitched. They're armed. I'm not going back in a box, Jalen. I'm done hiding. He reached into the storage drawer and pulled out the plasma spanner. Not a weapon, but in his hands, it would do. She grabbed the sealed pipe wrench. Heavy, blunt, functional. Back corner, he said. Darkest spot. If they break the lock, we use the lights. Syrie nodded. The door rattled once. Then again. No warning. No voices this time. Just a coded override surge on the locking mechanism. Too fast for local thieves. These were professionals. Hired. Trained. Dangerous. The lock gave. The door hissed open. 2 men stepped in, tall, armored in stripped-down exoplates. Their faces hidden behind reflective visors, weapons raised and steady. The first man scanned the room. The second stepped toward the heater, guns sweeping the area. Then, Jalen slammed the power grid switch. Darkness dropped over the room. In the space of a breath, chaos bloomed. Syrie lunged from the shadows, driving the pipe wrench into the back of the second man's leg. He crumpled with a grunt, his weapon clattering to the floor. Jalen struck the first man across the arm, forcing him off balance. The merc swung fast, too fast, and caught Jalen's shoulder with the butt of his gun. He staggered. Pain flared hot and fast. Syrie, he called. She was already moving, already low, already faster than either man had anticipated. She twisted, driving her knee into the injured one's side, stole his baton from the holster, and tossed it to Jalen. He caught it one-handed and turned just as the first merc raised his rifle again. The baton met his wrist. A crack, a scream. The gun dropped. They didn't give him in time to recover. Within seconds, both mercs were down, conscious but disarmed and pinned. Jalen crouched beside one, breathing hard. Who sent you? The man spat blood. Someone who knows what she is. She's a person, Jalen snapped. Not a product. The man laughed bitterly. You think that matters? Cyree stepped forward. He looked up at her, mask cracked, his lips split. They'll come again, he said. You think this changes anything? No, she replied. It ends it. Then she raised her foot and drove it hard into his helmet, knocking him cold. Jalen stared at her, not in fear, but in awe. You didn't hesitate. I couldn't, she said. He stepped closer. You protected me. She turned her head toward him. You would have done the same. I would have died for you. Her voice broke then. I don't want you to. He reached out, touched her face. Then we live. Together. That night, after dragging the merc's gear outside and locking down the entire unit, they lay on the floor beside the heater, the cot too far, too separate. Neither of them spoke for a long time. When she finally did, it was a whisper. I don't know what love is supposed to look like. He answered without hesitation. It looks like this. She turned her face into his shoulder and cried. For the first time, not because she was broken, but because she no longer had to be. Later, as they lay wrapped in each other, warm against the cold, try to claw its way back in, she whispered again. Promise me something. Anything. If I fall, don't carry me. Just fall with me. But make sure we get back up. He kissed her hair. We always will. And in the dark, beneath rusted walls and fading neon, that promise became their foundation, stronger than steel, louder than fear. They had survived what tried to destroy them. Now, they would build what no one could take. Together. By the time the cleanup was done, the outside world had gone eerily still. No patrols. No market noise. No mercenaries poking around the alleys. It was like Shard's Edge had paused to exhale. Or maybe it was just that nothing outside mattered anymore. Jalen stood in the doorway of the prefab, the chill from the frost-dusted wind brushing against his arms. The mercs were gone, stripped of gear, stripped of purpose. He'd sent a warning through the undernet. 2 intruders neutralized. Anyone else comes, they'll vanish. No one had answered. That meant it worked. Behind him, Cyree was packing. Not to flee, but to move forward. She folded her old cloak slowly, deliberately, as though saying goodbye to it. Jalen watched her hands. Not trembling anymore. Not tentative. You sure? He asked gently, his voice carrying more weight than just a question. She looked up. Her green skin seemed to glow in the soft light filtering through the dust-frosted window. She was different now, stronger but not hardened. Yes, she said. I want to leave this place. I want to choose something better. With you. There was no hesitation. Not anymore. They left the next morning before the traders stirred and the air scrubbers kicked in with their daily wheeze. Jalen carried a duffel. Nothing fancy. Just enough supplies to reach the ridge camp 3 clicks west where his old contact, Finn, still owed him favors. Cyree wore the old utility vest he'd modified to fit her hair braided tight, her eyes alert. She looked like someone stepping into her own story. The journey through the ice flats was harsh, even in daylight. The wind bit at them like teeth. The ice groaned beneath their boots. But they walked close, sharing warmth, speaking only when they needed to. It wasn't silence that filled the space between them. It was understanding. They reached the edge of the canyon after nightfall, their legs sore and faces flushed raw. Jalen lit a hand lamp and held it up. The canyon below shimmered with the faint outlines of prefabs, signal towers, and dome lights. The ridge camp. Independent. Off-grid. Mostly ignored. This is it, he said. Cyree stepped beside him. It doesn't look like much. It isn't. She smiled. Then it's perfect. They descended in careful steps, the path icy and narrow. When they finally reached the gate, Finn was already outside, a long coat draped over his lanky frame, goggles pushed up on his forehead. He hadn't changed. Still looked half mad, half genius. "Took you long enough?" he muttered. "And brought a friend?" "She's the reason I'm still breathing," Jalen said. Finn studied her, then nodded once. "Good eyes. That'll serve you here." Cyree didn't flinch. "Good hands, too." He chuckled. "Even better." They were given a corner unit to share. 2 rooms, 1 central heat core, basic rations, and a battered workbench. It felt like a palace. Jalen set down his pack and exhaled slowly. "We're safe here." Cyree didn't answer immediately. She walked over to the small, dust-smeared window, her silhouette lit by the red hue of the camp's beacon tower. "It's quiet," she said. "For now," he added, "but I think it can stay that way." She turned toward him. "Jalen, I need to ask something." His stomach nodded, but he nodded. "Anything." She stepped close. "I want to stay. Not just survive, stay. With you." He took her hands. "You already are." She swallowed. "Then I want something else, too. A place that's ours. A place we make." He smiled. "I've already been sketching it in my head." She blinked, surprised. "You have. Walls shaped to hold warmth. A roof strong enough for storms. A room just for you, full of light." "Why light?" she asked softly. "Because you came from shadows. And you deserve more than just surviving." Her breath caught. "And what about a room for both of us?" He kissed her then. Deep, quiet, not rushed. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. "We don't need a room," he whispered. "We are the shelter." Later that night, curled beneath a single thermal sheet, their bodies warm, breaths synced, she whispered one more thing. "If I told you something impossible, would you believe me?" "Try me. I think I can carry life." He went still. "You said they told you. They were wrong. Or maybe I changed. I don't know. But something shifted. I feel it." He reached down and pressed his hand softly against her belly. "Not because there was anything to feel. Not yet. But because it mattered. Then we make space," he said, "for whatever comes." Her fingers laced with his. And for the first time, neither of them felt small beneath the stars. Not broken. Not sold. Not hunted. Just human. And something more. Together, they had built what they were never given. Peace. Tomorrow, they'd start drawing up blueprints. But tonight, they rested, wrapped in warmth that no frost could touch, no buyer could claim, and no past could break. The first sign of spring on Shard's edge wasn't green. There were no flowers, no birds, no thawed rivers humming back to life. The moons never blossomed, but warmth lingered longer on the prefab walls. The wind blew without teeth. And once, just once, the morning sun lit the dust in their room gold instead of gray. That was the day she called him husband. Jalen woke before her, as he often did now, not out of habit or survival reflex, but because watching her sleep had become a kind of peace he never thought he'd earn. Cyree lay curled on her side, hair falling across her cheek like a dark waterfall. Her breathing was slow, deep. Her face, no longer hollow, no longer weary, looked young in the early light, like someone who had survived a lifetime only to begin another. He sat beside her on the edge of the bed and watched the frost retreat from the windows. The camp was still quiet, the kind of silence that wasn't emptiness but calm. When she stirred, her first reflex wasn't flinching anymore. She reached blindly for him, then blinked her silver eyes open and smiled. "Good morning," she whispered. He kissed her forehead. "It is now." They didn't say much as they made breakfast. Just soft touches, glances that lasted longer than necessary, the warmth between them steady as the heater cores pulse. He set up the small table while she brewed something strong from root herbs a merchant had gifted her. After they ate, she stood at the window for a long time, arms crossed over her chest, gaze stretched across the low hills beyond the camp. Jalen stepped up behind her. "What is it?" "I've been thinking," she said, "about what you said the other night. About making space." He waited, knowing not to fill the silence too quickly. "I used to be afraid of what might come next," she continued. "Afraid it would be taken from me, sold out from under my feet, or poisoned before it could grow." "And now?" he asked. Cyree turned slowly. Her expression was unreadable, serious, and soft, and something like wonder. Now I want it. All of it. The risk, the mess, the life. She reached for his hand, brought it to rest on her stomach again. This time, not in fear, not in question. In invitation. I think I'm ready to try, she said. Jalen swallowed hard. His thumb brushed her knuckles. For a child? He asked. She nodded. For everything. He stepped forward, pulled her into his arms, and pressed his mouth against her temple. Then we build it. Together. They kissed then, not rushed, not desperate, but slow. Familiar and new at once. When she broke away, her lips still close, she smiled with the kind of mischief that made his chest ache. Is this the part where I call you something cheesy? He smirked. I mean, if you're going to start now, I won't stop you. She leaned close again, her voice warm against his ear. My husband, she whispered. It hit harder than anything else ever had. Not because of the word, but because of how easily it fit. Like she'd always been carrying it, saving it for the day it would finally mean something real. He closed his eyes, and for a long time, they didn't speak. They just stood there, forehead to forehead, letting the heater hum and the sunlight move across the floor. Later, she would braid her hair while he drafted plans for a small greenhouse. They would argue over what to name the future child if it came, something human, something alien, something neither. She'd call him stubborn. He'd call her fire. But that day they simply began. Not with ceremony, not with grand declarations. Just warmth and choice and the kind of love that didn't need to be proven anymore. Only lived, only shared, only theirs. The end.